Welcome to The Homeless Conservative. I'm your host, Blake Fisher. Thank you for joining me. I wanted to talk about the fourth Republican debate. I actually watched this and basically kind of reacted to it live, but instead of giving you a 2.5 hour long podcast, I whittled it down to try to make it just 1 hour of kind of the highlights and me talking about where I think people got things wrong or right. The debate feels a little bit pointless because Trump is so far ahead in the polls that I'm not sure that anyone on the stage is going to catch up with him. Haley and DeSantis, I think it's got to be one of the two of them. So I've got more clips of the two of them because I think they're the realistic people to potentially take on Donald Trump and actually be able to beat him. Crazier things have happened in politics. So I'm not going to just say, well, polls say Trump's in the lead. That's it. We got to give up. But, you know, I think that if you're watching this or listening to us, you probably don't like Trump for some reason. It could just be that you're tired of him. It could be that you don't like his policies. It could be that you don't like his personality. I don't know. I'm going to guess you're not a big Trump fan if you're listening to me. Just a guess. I think it's going to be hard for him to not be the nominee because something like 80% of Republicans disagree with me and you. But, you know, I think it's still worth having the conversation, and I think it's worth having the conversation about these principles and these policies because Trump's not going to. All he cares about is himself. All he cares about is, you know, his retribution for losing in 2020. I mean, he claims the election was stolen from him, but it was not. You're starting to see a lot of stuff come out, like The Atlantic just came out with a thing, Washington Post, saying, oh, this is so dangerous if we reelect Trump. And I think they're not wrong. I just think that maybe it's the wrong message because I think that there is a knee-jerk reaction from conservatives and Republicans that goes, well, yeah, we've heard this before. You said this about Romney and McCain and George W. Bush and George Bush. And I mean, just pick every other nominee that happened before this. And they've said the same kind of things. I do think they're more true this time. I think that Trump proved that he didn't care about the Constitution when he tried to steal the election in 2020. That's just a fact. And I think that it's mostly about his ego. I don't think he really wants to be a dictator, maybe. I think it's just that he doesn't want to lose. I know that's a weird thing, but either way, the point is, I think we're kind of giving him superpowers by talking about him too much sometimes and how dangerous he is and stuff. And I do think he's dangerous. I think he shouldn't be the president ever again. I think we should have taken care of that with impeachment and removal, but we didn't. So what are you going to do? The point being, I don't think this debate matters a lot, but I think some of the policy issues are important. And I think that in the hopes of it maybe narrowing down to either DeSantis or Haley in a 1-to-1 matchup against Trump, it'd be worth listening to what they have to say. So it's mostly clips of Haley and DeSantis because I think that they've got the best shot. Chris Christie's a great debater and he's good on the stage and he had some great parts that I think you should look up if you want to, where he kind of went after Ron for basically he would not answer if Trump was fit to be in office again, just would not answer it. And I think there is a bunch of cowardice on stage right now, or just not just on stage, in the Republican Party in general about not being able to call out Trump for the things that they don't like about him. No, they just will. I mean, there's more of that in this debate, but just not enough. I don't think that most Republican voters are aware of the things he did that are even against their best interest. They just didn't do a good enough job. It's better than maybe some of the other debates where they hardly ever mention Trump at all, even though he's the giant elephant that's not in the room because he won't show up to the debates and he's leading by 50 points in some of the states. So anyway, if you enjoy this sort of thing, I tried to make it as relevant as possible on the issues that I think are relevant and cut out the stuff that I thought wasn't. Maybe that's just relevant to me. I'm not saying it's not relevant to politics, but so maybe that's sort of the view that I would give of this is my view of politics. But I cut it down to an hour. I tried to, so I apologize for the delay in getting this out a week late, but just didn't had some bad technology, and then I was out of town for the Army-Navy game over the weekend, which I highly suggest you go to if you ever get a chance. It was really, really fun. I'll do a little short about that. But yeah, so here is the Republican debate, the fourth Republican debate with Chris Christie, Vivek Ramaswamy, Ron DeSantis, and Nikki Haley. Enjoy.
Nikki, you were bankrupt when you left the UN. After you left the UN, you became a military contractor. You actually started joining service on the board of Boeing, whose back you scratched for a very long time, and then gave foreign multinational speeches like Hillary Clinton is. And now you're a multimillionaire. That math does not add up.
Why is it a problem if someone gives speeches and gets paid for it? I don't really understand why that's something that people are going after Nikki Haley for. It doesn't really bother me. It only bothered me with Hillary Clinton because at the time, Bill Clinton was giving speeches for donations to the Clinton foundations, essentially, while she was Secretary of State. There's a conflict of interest there. Nikki Haley was out of government service at the time. I don't have a problem with her giving speeches or being on boards or anything. She's a private citizen for that period of time. And yeah, sure. I mean, she obviously has potential future political aspirations, but she's a private citizen. I don't really mind it. I'm much more. It's way more problematic when people in Congress get rich while they're in Congress, not on their, whatever, $180,000 salaries or whatever they are. But, she wasn't in government at the time. I don't begrudge anyone for making money when they can to make speeches. I mean, if I could do speeches for a bunch of money, that'd be great. I don't know. I think this is kind of a nothing burger. It's like, they're clearly intimidated by Nikki Haley's rising in the polls in these states and her overtaking some of them in these early states. Ron DeSantis is still in second place in Iowa, but barely. Nikki Haley could certainly win it. She's definitely ahead in New Hampshire. She's obviously going to be ahead in her home state of South Carolina. This feels like grasping at straws to say, oh, look, you made a bunch of money as a private citizen, and now you're going to be beholden to those people. Maybe. I don't know. It feels like a nothing burger, though.
We discovered this week that he is one of Nikki Haley's largest supporters. Larry Fink, the king of the woke industrial complex, the ESG movement, the CEO of BlackRock, the most powerful company in the world, now supporting Nikki Haley.
Let's talk about why that's happening, I assume. So these people that are donating to Nikki Haley's campaign now, there's a bunch of people that waited to get into the Republican primary because they didn't want to waste a bunch of money on someone that didn't have the potential to actually beat Donald Trump. There are people on the left that are now scared of Donald Trump being president again. And I think rightfully so, because I think he'd be a scary second-term president. Hannity tried to ask him the other night, hey, just clear this up. Try to give him a complete way out of all the talk of everyone that's talking about him. He's going to be a dictator. He's going to be authoritarian. He's going to throw out the Constitution. Hannity tried to give him as many options as possible to get out of that. And Trump still wouldn't say he wouldn't be a dictator. He's like, I won't be a dictator except for day one. He wants revenge for these people that didn't side with him in his crazy election denial claims. And now that it shows that Biden's lost a lot of support, specifically because of his defense of Israel, with the Democratic base, who's, I would argue, 20% of them are anti-Semitic, 20% of them support Hamas. So I don't think you can be supporting Hamas unless you're anti-Semitic. I don't show me a way that that's possible. We can talk about that, but those people, he's losing younger voters, he's losing minorities, and now all of a sudden the polls look like Trump could potentially win. 6 months ago, I would have said there's no chance that Trump could possibly beat Biden again, who's he added to his coalition since 2020. But now Trump looks like he could potentially beat Biden, and I think that is scaring a lot of people that are putting money towards the only person they think that could potentially beat Trump in the primary, which is Nikki Haley. I think that's right according to the polls and the momentum and stuff. I mean, it's definitely only Haley or DeSantis. Those are the only two people that could possibly do this. And more of them are putting their money in Haley's camp because DeSantis has a lot of turmoil right now. They've gone through 3 CEOs of his super PAC, which are really, if you don't know, PACs are completely separate from campaigns. They can't actually coordinate at all or communicate. But his super PAC, which has most of the money, the CEO left, and then another one got fired, or I can't remember the exact order, but there's a lot of turmoil going on, and it seems like people are jumping ship from DeSantis. Doesn't seem like he's going to be able to go very far. And so the money is starting to go to Nikki Haley. I don't think there's a nefarious reason for that. I think it's because they think that she might be the only person that could beat Trump.
Your best state is New Hampshire, and even there, 2/3 of GOP voters say they would be angry and disappointed if you won. Respectfully, Governor, you have not stopped Mr. Trump, and voters may wonder how you could possibly become the nominee of a party that does not appear to like you very much.
Yeah, well, look, Megyn, it's often very difficult to be the only person on the stage who's telling the truth, and the only person who is taking on what needs to be taken on. I look at my watch now. We're 17 minutes into this debate, and except for your little speech in the beginning, we've had these 3 acting as if the race is between the 4 of us. The 5th guy, who doesn't have the guts to show up and stand here, he's the one who, as you just put it, is way ahead in the polls. And yet I've got these three guys who are all seemingly to compete with, Voldemort, he who shall not be named. They don't want to talk about it. The fact is that when you go and you say the truth about somebody who is a dictator, a bully, who has taken shots at everybody, whether they've given him great service or not over time, who dares to disagree with him, then I understand why these three are timid to say anything about it. Maybe it's because they have future aspirations. Maybe those future aspirations are now, or maybe they're 4 years from now. But the fact of the matter is the truth needs to be told. And for us to go 17 minutes without discussing the guy who has all those gaudy numbers you talked about is ridiculous. I'm in this race because the truth needs to be spoken. He is unfit. This is a guy who just said this past week that he wants to use the Department of Justice to go after his enemies when he gets in there. I mean, the fact of the matter is he is unfit to be president, and there is no bigger issue in this race, Megyn, than Donald Trump, and those numbers prove it.
Christie's right. I mean, it's ridiculous that we're in the fourth debate and Trump's been brought up maybe for 15 minutes of the first three. They're getting walloped in the polls. 81% of Republicans have approve of Trump in some way or another. It seems crazy to me, but I don't think Christie's done a good enough job at this, though. He's really not been the attack dog that I think we thought he was going to be, because it's not been a relentless thing. I think at some point I thought that Christie might get into this race and just attack Trump constantly and then get out when it was good to like coalesce behind someone. I think that's clearly Haley or DeSantis at this point, and it's not him. And I don't know if he's just waiting for them to attack Trump more, but I do think calling them out for not doing so is good. I think we need to do that. I think that Trump is dangerous. I think Christie's right. I wish he'd go into some more of the details, because the problem that I see is that most Republicans are okay with Donald Trump saying that he would use the Justice Department to go after his enemies. And that seems kind of crazy to me, right? Because you got to remember, like, everything that we say is okay for our side to do. Are you okay with Biden using the Justice Department to go after his enemies? And they would argue that that's what he's doing right now by indicting Trump on these things. And I think there's a little bit of credibility there, because I don't really see why the Department of Justice couldn't have brought their federal indictments against Trump much earlier. The raid on Mar-a-Lago was in 2021. I don't understand why it took so long. None of them came until after he announced he was going to run for president. I think they just hoped he'd go away, and that's what keeps happening. No one has the backbone to do what's right in the right moment. They're just waiting until it's too late. And so, yeah, it does look like weaponization, and I think in some ways it has been. I don't think that it means Donald Trump is innocent of the charges. I just think that the timing of it seems... we could have been doing this a long time ago. There's not a lot that's changed since January 6th of 2021 that we needed to wait 2 years to bring these charges. And we won't even be, I think his first court date is in March, the same week as Super Tuesday. That timing seems, suspicious. And I think that's fair to say. But Christie, I hope we see more attacking from him.
Iran is on the threshold of becoming a nuclear state. The Wall Street Journal reported that Iranian military leaders gave the green light for Hamas's attack on Israel. You said in last month's debate that, by contrast to the Biden administration's approach to Iran, you would, quote, punch them once and punch them hard. Were you saying that it's time to bomb Iran?
No, I was not saying it's time to bomb Iran, but I will tell you, I dealt with Iran every day when I was at the United Nations, and they only respond to strength. What they don't respond to is when you weaken the sanctions like they did on Iran that allowed China to send them billions to fill their proxies. What they don't respond to is when you give $6 billion for 5 hostages. That only makes them want more hostages. What they don't respond to is when they do 140 strikes on our men and women in Syria and Iraq, and we do nothing but just some small shots back. You've got to punch them hard, and let them know that. That's the only way they're going to respond. So the way you do that is you go after their infrastructure in Syria and Iraq where they're hitting our soldiers. That's what you do, and then that's when they'll back off. The problem is you have to see that all of these are related. If you look at the fact Russia was losing that war with Ukraine, Putin had hit rock bottom. They had raised the draft age to 65. He was getting drones and missiles, drones drones from Iran, missiles from North Korea. And so what happened? When he hit rock bottom, all of a sudden, his other friend, Iran, Hamas goes and invades Israel and butchers those people on Putin's birthday. There is no one happier right now than Putin, because all of the attention America had on Ukraine suddenly went to Israel. And that's what they were hoping is going to happen. We need to make sure that we have full clarity that there is a reason, again, that Taiwanese want to help Ukrainians, because they know if Ukraine wins, China won't invade Taiwan. There's a reason the Ukrainians want to help Israelis, because they know that if Iran wins, Russia wins. These are all connected. But what wins all of that is a strong America, not a weak America. And that's what Joe Biden's given us.
I think this is right. I mean, so a couple things about the Israel thing that's important is that I realize for most people's basic understanding of what's going on is that it's all separate, that there's a Ukraine-Russia situation, there's a Hamas-Israel situation, but it's all connected. Like Iran and Russia and China and North Korea and a couple other ones are kind of in this, I mean, like the best way I've heard it is like the axis of a-holes is what I've heard it referred to as, which I think is a little bit accurate, because there's, it's like they're not necessarily coordinating with each other, but they are scratching each other's backs probably. We don't have any information that shows that like Russia and Iran got together and were like, you know what, we need a distraction from the Ukraine war and we need to get in there and we need to start something somewhere else. This Hamas thing was probably planned over the course of a couple of years, but there's no doubt that they didn't get a green light from Iran. Generally how this works is Iran will give money to these organizations like Hezbollah and Hamas, and they basically say, you can do whatever with this, and they will tell them what they can and can't do. They don't necessarily want to have a digital track of here's where the person in Iran told these people they could attack these people, because they don't need that kind of accountability where we could go back and see a paper trail and say, you authorized this and now we're attacking you or whatever. So it's purposely vague. It's purposely like, hey, we don't need to know what you do with this money and stuff. I don't believe for a second there's not some sort of coordination with this stuff, though. It's too beneficial to Russia. It's too beneficial to Iran. Keep in mind, another thing that doesn't get talked about a lot, it did at first, but Saudi Arabia and Israel at the time were talking about having more diplomatic relationships and having more trade and things like that. And this has happened with a lot of Arab nations, and Iran hates Israel and does not want that to happen. They do not want to normalize Israel in the Middle East. They don't want people to have good, agreements and trade and things like that with Israel. And so it was in there. They did not want Saudi Arabia to. Saudi Arabia is also Iran's enemy, and they did not need two people joining up to be able to like go against Iran. So it is all connected. We do need someone with. This is foreign policy is going to be more important in. I think it's always important. I think it's always the most important job the president has, but I think it's even more important now than it has been. And I don't think Joe Biden's up for it. I don't think he has proven that he's willing to say what he really feels is right. I do think he is truly pro-Israel, but everyone around him isn't. And I think that he's done, his initial statements on Israel and actions were better, but same thing with Ukraine. It's like, if we're going to support Ukraine, let's support them. Let's give them exactly what they want when they ask for it, and not ask any questions, not ask any questions, but if they ask for something and they say, we need this to be able to win this, and we wait 6 months to a year to give them that thing, that's not helpful. That's actually worse. We are prolonging this Ukraine conflict. And so this is why I like Nikki Haley. This all my priors out is that she has more foreign policy experience than the other people on the stage. Ron DeSantis is a good governor, and I think that is a lot of what the president does too. You're an executive, you are running the executive branch, and Ron DeSantis, and three of these people on stage have been governors before, so they all have that experience. I think executives make better executives than Congress people, for example. Legislators don't necessarily make great executives, and vice versa. But Haley and DeSantis and Christie have all been governors, and they were, I think, good governors too, especially Christie in a blue state. That's a hard thing to be a Republican in a blue state, and he got reelected. So I think that means that he did some good stuff. But the foreign policy thing I think is going to be really important, which is why I think Nikki Haley is a better choice for 2024 if I could have my pick, because I think that this stuff matters, and she has more experience with it, having been in the UN. People didn't think she would do a good job at the UN. They're like, why are we picking a governor from South Carolina to go be in the UN? First of all, I don't like the UN. But aside from that, everyone really, even Democrats in the Senate who confirmed her, later came back and were like, you know what? She's done a great job. And so she did a good job. She's, I think, good at learning on the job kind of thing. And so she has some more experience. But I think this is important to understand because it's very, very complicated. And there is not an easy answer. I know Vivek Ramaswamy wants to pretend there are easy answers to foreign policy. There are not easy answers. Getting in the middle of it, staying out of it, you can't just... It's not 100% one or 0%. Like, it's not a gas pedal or brake pedal. There's a lot of stuff that goes into this, and it's way more complicated than what I even know about. I'm not a foreign policy expert at all, but I want someone that is in the White House.
You are a former military lawyer. Why do you think this idea of yours would be legal?
The drug cartels are invading our country, and they are killing our citizens by the tens of thousands every year. We had a situation in Florida. There was an 18-month-old baby that was crawling on the floor of an Airbnb rental. There was fentanyl residue on the carpet, and the baby died. Is this acceptable in this country? I know the elites in D.C., they don't care. They don't care that fentanyl's ravaging your community. They don't care that illegal aliens are ravaging our community and overwhelming our community. The commander-in-chief not only has a right, you have a responsibility to fight back against these people.
And does that mean shooting first?
It means you're going to categorize them as foreign terrorist organizations, and we will identify, just like we would anywhere. When I was in Iraq, the Al-Qaeda wasn't wearing a uniform. You'd see anyone walking down the street, they all had man dresses on. You didn't know if someone had a bomb, an IED attached or not. And so you had to make a judgment based on intelligence, based on positive identification. But we're going to be able to get the intelligence on these cartel people. And here's the thing. If we had a wall across the southern border, which I support, this would not have happened. We need to build a wall across the southern border. I'll get it done, and Mexico is supposed to pay for it. Remember, here's how you do that. I'm going to have fees on remittances from foreign workers when they send the money back to foreign countries. We're going to tax it, and we're going to build a wall with that. So yes, you should have had that, but we don't have it. I'm going to build it, but we have to lean in on this problem. I am not going to sit there and allow mothers to lose more kids because of fentanyl overdose. I am not going to sit there and let sex trafficking go unabated or human trafficking go unabated. There's going to be a new sheriff in town, and these drug cartels better buckle up.
I'm pretty sure it's not legal to go after the Mexican cartel coming across the border. First of all, most of the fentanyl that's being snuck into the U.S. is going through the border checkpoints. A lot of them are by Americans that are smuggling them in. So this is not the kind of thing that's coming over the fences. I'm not saying it's not at all. It's just like it's documented to be mostly coming through the borders, the actual checkpoints. So not sure it's possible.
When you talk about fentanyl like you did before, let's look at something else. Yes, I think we should send special operations over and take out the cartels. I think we should do a remain in Mexico policy so they never step foot in U.S. soil in the first place. But look at where fentanyl came from. Let's go to the heart of the matter. It came from China. That's why we need to end all normal trade relations with China until they stop murdering Americans with fentanyl. I promise you, they need our economy. They will immediately stop that. But this is where Trump went wrong. Trump was good on trade. But that's all he was with China, because here he allowed fentanyl to continue to come over. He continued to allow them to he would give them technology that would build up their military and hurt us. He allowed the Chinese infiltration for them to buy up farmland, to put money in our universities, and to continue to do things that were harmful for America. We now have a spy base in Cuba and police stations, and Trump didn't do anything about it.
Let's talk about this for just 1 second, because I think that some of her answer was important to talk about. She's right. The fentanyl is being either manufactured in China and then sent here, or the raw materials are being shipped from basically China to the U.S., Canada, and Mexico directly. More directly probably to Mexico than directly to the United States. It's literally just getting sent in the mail, because what you need to understand about fentanyl is that the lethal dose for fentanyl is like next to a penny. It's like a little grain of salt or something. So they can ship massive amounts of this just using the mail systems and other things like that. And so it's a problem. China's basically not enforcing they're not going after these people, because they're using it as a way to negotiate with the United States. So what they're doing is coming to us and going like, oh, yeah, we might be able to do something about stopping the flow of fentanyl to your country if you give us whatever they want, from the U.S. And that's worked. I think it's trade relations are complicated, obviously, and they're especially complicated with China because we're so intertwined. We do so much manufacturing there. They're relying on our economy and we're relying on their economy. Honestly, if we broke, we'd be worse off and they'd be worse off. So, we do need to figure out how to do it with China without enabling the things that we don't want to enable. So, for example, their slave labor of Uyghurs and stuff. We need to figure out how to do that. Fentanyl is really tricky, though, because I don't think there's, we can't just go take out the cartel. First of all, some of it's coming directly to the U.S. Some of it's going to Canada, too. It's actually coming from the northern border, too, which we don't talk about a lot. Because it's so small, Ron DeSantis mentioned he's going to shoot anyone with a backpack. Because literally, a backpack is actually bigger than it needs to be. It can fit in a very small package a lot of deadly drugs. And so China's not going to do that willingly because China's goal is to have world dominance. They want to be the world power that everyone is connected to and relies on. They don't want that to be us anymore. And so you got to be careful about saying we got to cut off all trade relations. I don't know that that's possible. I do think that there needs to be some better trade relations, but it gets really tricky when we're talking about fentanyl because it is so easy to get into the country that I'm not sure that we can solve the problem of it coming in the country at this point. China doesn't seem to want to enforce and go after the people that are manufacturing this and the raw materials or getting it to the United States. And it's interesting because it's mostly a United States problem. It's not actually a worldwide problem, which to me clearly signifies that China is okay with that. And this isn't a problem that they're shipping a bunch to the EU and we don't have a bunch of fentanyl overdoses in China. It's clearly on purpose. I think that we've got to go after them for doing that on purpose. I think that's something most people aren't aware of enough.
Homeownership has always been part of the American dream, but it's increasingly out of reach for younger Americans. Is this the free market at work, or should the federal government do something to make homes more affordable?
If you first of all look at what the Fed did. The Fed did a terrible job when they allowed all of that money to go through. You saw the Treasury bond rates go up. That affected mortgage rates, that affected automobile rates, that affected insurance rates. And so now we have a high interest rate. You've got a supply issue. Ask any builder. The supply issues have continued to be there. That's caused the rate to go up. And then you've got insurances that have gone up. And so what you have is a lot of younger people who, one, can't afford a home, but two, the banks aren't lending them any money. They've made the regulations so hard that they don't want to give loans on mortgages anymore. So what we have to do is we have to open it up. We have to, one, grow our economy so that people have more money in their pockets. We've got to look at the supply chain and make sure that we are funneling that so that builders don't have to sit there and go overseas to find things. And then we need to make sure that we really stop paying down this debt, make sure that we stop the borrowing, stop the spending. I'll veto any spending bill that doesn't take us back to pre-COVID levels, because our kids are not going to forgive us for all the spending that happened. And as much as everybody wants to talk about how Donald Trump had a good economy, $9 trillion in debt he did just in 4 years. And we're all paying the price of that, including those mortgage prices.
Okay, this is a good place to stop and talk about this for just 1 second. So the affordability crisis with housing specifically is, I think, less of a national. I mean, there are some national problems. I think the two biggest problems that she didn't touch on were trade policy that's making the raw materials cost more. So during COVID, for example, we shut down all of our sawmills where we would make 2x4s and stuff. We forced them to shut down during COVID. Okay. And then we won't allow imports from Canada, our friendly neighbor to the north. We won't allow them to give us wood without an incredible, I can't remember what the tariff is. It's pretty high, though. It's something like 20% or something. Because we're trying to protect our loggers and our sawmills and stuff like that. That's protectionism, and what that meant was that's what caused the constraints. So you just bottlenecked the entire supply of wood in the country, and every other building material was like this too. So that's where the president can have control. The president can control things like trade policy. They can say, we're gonna get rid of tariffs. tariffs are taxes on Americans. They pretend they're not, but they are. They are trying to protect small industries generally. So steel is another one, for example, that Donald Trump signed these steel tariffs that would say, hey, there's going to be a 25% tariff on any steel coming from outside the U.S. And what that's trying to do is protect the steel workers, which are like 3,000 people or something. You know, I might be wrong about that number, but it's a very small industry as far as like it's an important one, but it's not a huge labor market. It's not like teachers or some sort of thing where there's millions of them. And that specifically, that makes the cost of steel higher. That makes the cost of wood higher. That makes the cost of these raw materials. So she's right about the raw materials, but she's not talking about what the actual problem is, which is tariffs that make that stuff go way high because we are making, instead of, for all the talk about free enterprise and markets, let markets decide. The United States government is not doing that because what they're doing is saying, hey, you can buy the American version of this for cheaper, but we're going to tax the other ones and make them more expensive. While at the same time, those American suppliers not being able to keep up with the demand, which makes the prices of everything go up because that makes the prices of the American stuff go up as well as the foreign stuff. Because even if, like, let's say Canada wants to send us some wood or we want to buy wood from Canada, you're going to have to buy that at a basically 25% markup because of the tariff. So that's what the president can do. But then the other problem, the bigger problem with housing, the reason there is not affordable housing is because local restrictions are restricting buildings. So this is zoning laws. This is people saying, most cities now, it's like very hard to build a multifamily complex that, like, for example, you used to see in a lot of like downtown areas, you'll see duplexes and fourplexes and small like 10-unit apartment buildings. Those are getting zoned out of cities because basically the neighbors don't want them there. They think they're going to drive down their property values, and those people have loud voices and they prevent it from happening. So it's really hard, even in some places, to build like a garage apartment behind your house. They won't allow that to happen. So we're not letting, and that's a local thing. So the president can certainly encourage that, but that's a state law and even down to city and county laws. And that's really what the problem is that it's very, very hard and way too expensive to build these small houses, these sort of starter homes. No one is building them because they cannot make money doing so. If they could make money doing so, which we obviously used to be able to do in the past because we have all these starter homes, but they're all 100 years old now or something. Not even that. I mean, there were a lot of them that were still built in the 60s and stuff. But we've just decided we won't allow those to be built. And we're saying, oh, well, this entire area here is single family units only. And the lots have to be X amount of size. And it's very hard to get past that. That is the problem with affordable housing, and I need to do some episodes on affordable housing because it's a huge problem everyone's talking about. I just don't think anyone is getting the answer right on why it's why the problem exists, and most of it is government interference in the market. This is not a free market problem. This is that government is trying to manipulate the market. That doesn't make it free. End of rant.
We will rescind any regulation that fails the test of West Virginia versus EPA, which is the most important Supreme Court case of our lifetime, that said if Congress didn't delegate that to an administrative agency, then it's unconstitutional. These are seismic changes. These are big changes that the next president can deliver without asking Congress for permission or for forgiveness. And I want people to understand that distinction, because people have been sold myths by politicians for a long time saying, I'm going to work with Congress to do this or that. Much of what you've heard on the stage from the other politicians fit that description. They need Congress. The things that I'm promising you, this is what the leader of the executive branch gets to do under Article 2 of the Constitution.
Thank you, sir.
Cut down the bureaucracy. That's how we grow our economy, and put the Federal Reserve in its place. This is part of the crypto discussion.
No.
90% headcount reduction at the Fed.
You're out of time. 15.
Okay, Ramaswamy does have a bit of a point here in that the executive, people running for president always make a lot of claims of things that they can do that are not really presidential powers. They're congressional powers. They're things that we gave Congress, the House and the Senate, the authority to do. And then obviously the president signs those bills. But he's right. Most of these legislation efforts have been Congress writing out the vague outline of what they want to do. And then they create a government agency to then do that. And how this normally works is what happens is that they go, all right, we want you, the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. You're tasked with doing this. And what they do, instead of, debating what the rules should be themselves, they say, okay, EPA, you can make up rules. FTC you can make up rules, FCC, any of these kind of FAA, like pick the 3-letter agency, and you get to make rules that American businesses and people have to follow. And if we think you go too far, we can kind of veto your rules, but we don't have to approve every one of them. We don't have to vote on every rule. And there's some of this that makes sense. You do need some government bureaucracy to be able to like let them run with it without Congress having to debate and pass a law for every single thing. But it's gotten way out of hand because basically Congress doesn't want to have to write the unpopular rules, is what really is going on, is that they're going like, yay, we, cut a ribbon and we say, yay, we're going to protect the environment. And then they let the EPA run wild for decades and without really any accountability. And this ran by people that are not elected. He's right. They're not elected by us. They're bureaucrats. And we need bureaucracy. Like, we need some of it. We don't need as much as we have right now because the number of government agencies that the president is over is way too many. When we created this country, there were basically, it was the military and I think there was the Treasury. I think that was it, maybe. Well, now we've got, I think there's like 270 agencies. It's some astronomical number where you're like, there's no way this can all be under one branch of the government, and it's bloated. And most of the jobs that have been created by administrations in the past have been government jobs, and there's almost no accountability for these agencies. He's right about some of the fact that the president can come in and clean house, because he is the leader of the executive branch. So he can fire people. He can do most of that kind of stuff if they're not posts that have to be, confirmed by the Senate. I think there's some of this. I think Ramaswamy goes a little too far in the sense that he thinks that he's just going to shut down the Department of Education on day one. I think it's a little harder than he thinks it would be to do so. But yes, he's right. The president does have more control. This is actually one of those things that he can do a lot of stuff on day one. Whereas the president can't pass gun control laws on day one. The Congress has to do that, which he can encourage them and say, here's what I would sign. And then he can sign it. He can do politics with people to get them to do that. But the president does not have the power that we think they have a lot of times. And I think in this country, the biggest problem we have is that we think the president is going to be our savior and is going to be able to do everything that they want to do. And it's not the kind of government we have. And I think that's a good thing that we don't have that kind of government. I do not want the president to be able to unilaterally do whatever he wants. But we do have a problem here in the sense that there is, these rules are changing all the time and there's no consistency. So if you own a business, you are worried about what the next thing's going to happen because it's not written in law. It's just some government agency that can make it up. And, on a really local, very, very small level, I'm in Oklahoma. We have a thing called the Able Commission, which controls all the alcohol sales. And I know so many businesses because I know people that own restaurants and breweries and things. And it's a nightmare to deal with them because they can just make up any rule they want without any sort of legislative backing of it. And at a national level, that's insane. I think it's crazy at a local level, but certainly at a national level, you've got a president that comes in and says, you know what, now this is my goal. And so they're going to tell those agencies to do what their bidding is. And it's going to totally change the way businesses and people, basically we have no idea right now in 2023 what we will be dealing with regulatory in 1.5 years, for example. Because it's either going to be Biden that's in the White House, or it might be some Republican, or it might be someone else. And those rules that govern our lives way more than the legislation does, the actual laws do, are the things that are actually stopping innovation. They're the things that are preventing businesses from growing. There's the reason a lot of people doctors are just I'm out of here, because sometimes, the regulatory kind of hoops that they have to jump through, they don't want to do anymore. So we got to pare back some of this regulatory stuff. We got to pare back some of the bureaucracy. I think the president can do some of that by themselves, but it really is up to Congress to go back to doing their job and write laws instead of just creating government agencies that then make rules that they rarely ever come back and say, you've gone too far. And then we got to stop that.
Former President Trump recently promised, if he's reelected, to bring back and expand his program restricting immigration from Muslim countries. Ambassador Haley, do you support President Trump's plan for ideological screening?
Well, I don't think that you have a straight-up Muslim ban as much as you look at the countries that have terrorist activity that want to hurt Americans.
Nikki Haley's right on this one, by the way, is that there's actually... What's dumb about this is that Trump's ban was from certain countries, but he kept calling it a Muslim ban. This is literally a PR thing. If he just would have said, look, terrorists are coming from these countries. We're not going to allow immigrants from those countries for the safety of our country. And instead he called it a Muslim ban because he knew what he was doing. Because I think we don't need to vilify a religion, but we should vilify the countries and the extreme versions of that religion. And I don't think there's a problem with that. I don't think most people have a problem with that. But the messaging does matter. You can't call it a Muslim ban or call it from Muslim countries. The countries happen to be Muslim, some of them, but not all of them. China's not Muslim. They're actually persecuting Muslims. That's what the Uyghur kind of basically concentration camps are. Those are ethnic Muslims in China. And Russia obviously isn't Muslim. So, I mean, we've got to the messaging on this is the problem. And so if you say it's a Muslim ban, and by you, I mean Donald Trump says that, people are going to believe you. They're going to take you at your word that that's why you're banning them. And it probably is why he was banning them, at least in spirit. So Haley's answer is right. And a lot of you look at the immigration from the southern border, and it is crazy how many are from Middle Eastern countries and Russia and China. And I'm like, wait a minute. So those people flew or took a boat to Mexico or somewhere south of us and then illegally entered our country. You've got to think that some of that is nefarious and some of that is probably terrorism. It doesn't make sense why someone from Yemen would go to Mexico first to get in the United States. Maybe it's all innocent. It doesn't seem up and up. And I think we've got to pay a lot more attention to it.
But look what's happened in Europe. You have more anti-Semitism in Germany than at any time since Adolf Hitler. Why? Because they imported mass numbers of people who reject their culture. And we should not be importing people from cultures that are hostile. So, for example, I said with the Gaza, you had some of the squad wanted to import 300,000 people from the Gaza Strip. I said, no, we're not taking anyone from Gaza because of the anti-Semitism and because they reject American culture. So we've got to get smart about this. We cannot let the United States be like Europe.
This is tricky. It really is, because in some ways I want to welcome people that are persecuted in their countries or in danger in their countries or things like that, or just want to make a better life, honestly. Like, we're a nation of immigrants and it's been a good thing for the most part. I don't think we should accept people that don't align with our values, though. I'm not saying you have to completely, the bad word now is, assimilate into America, as if we're erasing these people's culture. But I mean, you should be pro-American if you're going to come to America. You should not be anti-Semitic. You should not be, there are some things that I think are fine litmus tests that we should say, no, those aren't our values. And so you can't come here. It's our choice as citizens to elect people to make these decisions and say, who do we want in this country? Who do we not want in this country? And it's not about religion. It's not about what country you're from. It's about trying to assess those individuals' values that they're coming here and make sure that they align with ours. And I'm not saying we all have the exact same value set, but we should have an agreed upon list of things that we're okay with or not okay with. And right now, there's no merit to it. There's a lot of familial stuff that happens with immigration. So it's you have a family member here. That gets you to the top of the list more than merit. So we have a doctor crisis right now. We do not have enough doctors. We will not have enough doctors as doctors retires. So a priority should be importing doctors from other countries. I don't care what countries they are, as long as A, they're doctors, and B, we vet them to make sure that they're not also terrorists or something. But I think the chances are pretty unlikely. So I think first thing with immigration, we got to start looking at who is coming here, who do we need, what kind of jobs do we need filled. Doctors would be one, because we're just not producing the doctors we need. And that's just one example. But this is tricky because you have to be able to write it down in the law. How do you write into the law, how are we going to screen someone for their values? That seems pretty hard. I don't know enough about immigration to know. I'd like to have someone on the show to talk about it, but she's not wrong.
When you were governor in 2017, you signed a law that required new guidelines for schools dealing with transgender students. Those guidelines required schools to accept a child's preferred gender identity, even if the minor's parents objected.
Not true.
And it said that there is no duty for schools to notify parents if their son or daughter changes their gender identity, allowing this serious issue to remain a secret between the school and a child. How is any of that pro-parental rights?
By the way, that's simply not true.
You're doing
doing what you accuse me of, Chris. It is absolutely true.
That's simply not true. That's simply not true. That law was put into effect in 2018 and regulated in 2018 after I was out of office, Megan. No, we did not, Megan. We did not issue those guidelines, and you're wrong about that. Simply wrong. I have stood up each and every time.
So I think if this is one issue that's disqualifying, it's this one.
I stood up every single time for parents to be able to make the decisions for their minor children.
But parents...
Every single time, parents should make those decisions. And by the way, you know what? Every once in a while, parents are going to make decisions that we disagree with. But the minute you start to take those rights away from parents, you don't know that slippery slope, what rights are going to be taken away next, and what's going to be focused on.
As a parent, you do not have the right to abuse your kids. This is cutting off their genitals. This is mutilating these minors. These are irreversible procedures, and this is something that other countries in Europe, like Sweden, once they started doing it, they saw it did incalculable damage. They've shut it down. I signed legislation in Florida banning the mutilation of minors because it is wrong. We cannot allow this to happen in this country. And I know Chris disagrees with me, and I think he has an honest position. Nikki disagrees with me. She opposes the bill that we did to ban that. She said the law shouldn't get involved with it. You said the law shouldn't get involved with it. She also, though, I think, and this flows from what she did as governor of South Carolina, they had a bill to try to say that men shouldn't go into girls' bathrooms. And she killed that bill, and she bragged that she killed that bill. Even to this day, she bragged that. I don't think men should be going into little girls' bathrooms. I think it's wrong, and I think we have every right to protect them from that.
I think Ron's answer is better than Christie's. Honestly, I get where Christie's coming from. Parental rights, I'm all for it. But this is different. We don't allow kids to smoke cigarettes. We don't allow minors to get married. We don't allow them to get tattoos. We don't allow them to vote. We don't allow them to drink. We don't allow them to do drugs. There's all sorts of things that we've said children, we should not, they can cause permanent damage to children when they can't make those decisions. I agree. We should not be enabling child abuse. I get that the transgender stuff is very complicated, but to me, there's one part that's not. We should not be chemically or surgically altering children's lives permanently when they're minors. I'm not saying whatever. You can find other ways to support kids that are going through that you don't have to resort to surgeries. You don't have to resort to puberty blockers. They claim that that's cruel to not do, but I think what we're really seeing is that long term, it's cruel to allow them to give into their whims, essentially, because these are kids. Like I said, it would also be cruel to let them get married as a minor, or to have sexual relations with adults when they're a minor, or to smoke or drink or get tattoos. Any kind of permanent damage that's going to come from a child's... Think back to when you were a teenager, okay? Did you make the best decisions? You know what I mean? Like, I know I did not. I think I was a pretty good kid, but I certainly didn't make a lot of fantastic decisions when I was a child. And I'm glad that I had parents and people around me to help protect me from that and not allow me to make some of those decisions. I don't think permanent surgery is good. And by the way, that would go for, I don't want a 16-year-old to get a boob job. I think that's wrong. I don't think we should allow that. I don't think we should be allowing people to have permanent cosmetic surgeries when they're minors. I think that's a simple thing to ask. I think Ron's answer is definitely better than Christie's here. At least I agree with him more.
For 15 years, Republicans have been burned by politicians' promises to repeal Obamacare. Trump repeatedly promised to replace it with, quote, something terrific, but failed to propose anything. You're now promising something better. But Florida has more uninsured people than almost any other state. Why should Americans trust you more than any other Republicans who've disappointed them on this issue?
Well, I think we have millions of Americans who do not have access to affordable health care. And it's not just getting some type of card and Medicaid, because a lot of times they don't even get access to doctors. Do you actually get access to care? The other thing is we have millions and millions of people who don't have access to good doctors and good hospitals. Florida did not not expand Obamacare. I think the states that did that, I think, are struggling financially. So that, yes, we declined to do that, and I don't think that that was the right policy to do. But we are going to go after the cost. You're paying too much for everything. We've actually addressed this in Florida in some ways, but you need price transparency. You need to hold the pharmaceuticals accountable. You need to hold big insurance and big government accountable, and we're going to get that done. I think it's very, very important economically. I think it's very, very important for the country that we get that done.
Ron's right, but you can't just say there's going to be accountability. I would like to have an entire 2-hour debate just about healthcare because I think it affects everyone in the country. No one really has a good plan, and no one will really talk about how complicated this is when you're dealing with care providers and you're dealing with insurance companies and you're dealing with individual, obviously the patients, and it's very, very complicated, and it's a huge mess. And promising little 30-second sound bites to be able to come in and fix that, I think is insincere, and I think we need to have a better discussion about it. I don't have any easy answers. I think there's a lot of things that need to happen, but no one will be happy. Insurance companies won't be happy. Providers won't be happy. Hospitals won't be happy. Government won't be happy. People won't be happy. There's got to be some better way to do this, because right now it's just astronomical what we're paying for medical stuff.
If we had been allowed to openly debate the merits of those vaccines, they would have been never mandated in the way that they were. And in general, I don't think that we should want capitalism and democracy to share the same bed anymore. It's time for a clean divorce. Let companies be companies, but I don't like the crony capitalism. This dates back a long time in both parties. And I think that we need to end the lobbying. And I personally believe that if you have been working in the government, you should not lobby that government for 10 years. If you have been a government elected official doing deals with companies, be they Boeing or be they pharmaceutical companies, you should not join the board of that company for 10 years after. The former chairman of the FDA, the leader commissioner of the FDA, ended up on the board of Pfizer. Nikki Haley did deals with Boeing, ends up on the board of Boeing. I don't care if it's a Republican or a Democrat. We need some basic principles that end the corruption in government. That's how we got the health insurance exemptions. That's how we got the pharmaceutical product liability exemptions.
Thank you.
We end the corruption.
I want to pause there for just 1 second and talk about this. This is something that's brought up a lot, where it's like, should people be able to be lobbyists, and this sort of revolving door that you hear about a lot in Washington. And I think it's a good thing to bring up. I've looked into it some, in the sense that there's pretty smart people that think that legally, constitutionally, you could not prevent someone, once they're a private citizen, from going into any specific job, because once you leave Congress, you are a private citizen again. So you're not a government employee. And the Constitution says we can't tell people what jobs they can and can't have. And so I don't think it's constitutionally possible unless you change the Constitution. And I think that that's not going to happen, because do you know who has to do that? Congress. Well, not has to. We could do a constitutional convention, but it's not very likely to happen. So I don't think you can stop that revolving door. I do agree that there is definitely a lot of bad stuff that goes on as far as influence peddling and things like that. But I don't think that that's, it's another way people serve too, is on boards of private companies or public companies and stuff. And I think it's more complicated than they're making it sound. It is a problem, but I don't think it's a problem with as easy a solution as saying we're going to ban them from working as a lobbyist for 10 years or being on boards for 10 years. I don't think that the Constitution allows us to say private citizens can't do a job that they're asked to do. Short of it being like local government saying, oh, well, you've got to have a medical license to be a doctor, but that's a requirement, but they can't just disqualify you based on a past job that you had. That doesn't seem like it would hold legal water. And so I think that that's an important thing to think of. And we can talk more about all this kind of stuff, but I don't think that there's his point on crony capitalism is absolutely correct. We are creating carve-outs for businesses, and I don't think we should separate those two things. So, count me as wrong for Vivek actually having a point. But we do need to get out of the job of it. Republicans do it. Democrats do it. They all do it, where they say, well, you know what? We want carve-outs for this business or this. We got to stop it. Like, we can't be saying we are free market capitalist and then pretend that giving certain companies an edge is the free market. It's not. When the government picks winners and losers, we all lose, because we're paying higher prices for it. We are getting worse products sometimes for it. We are not able to, like mentioned, we can't sue the vaccine companies for if we had adverse effects from it. There are these protections that are put in there that are, I think, wrong. And we shouldn't be protecting certain people. Now, the Operation Warp Speed thing had some carve-outs for it. We were trying to get it done as fast as possible. What most people don't talk about with the Warp Speed stuff and getting that vaccine online so fast, which no one really thought was going to be possible, is that most of the reason we got that fast is because the government got out of the way. We reduced the FDA approvals. We stopped... we didn't require as many tests as far as real trials because we saw that, like, for example, this wasn't with the vaccine, but this was with whatever the medication was that was good at preventing you from dying once you had COVID. I'm totally blanking on whatever it was, but basically in the trials they were showing that it was an incredible success. It was basically preventing people from dying that already have COVID. So forget this. This is not even talking about a vaccine. And basically the government said, look, it would be immoral for us to continue testing when we could save lives right now by this thing based on this first trial. So the government got out of the way. We sped up the process by getting out of the way and getting the red tape out of the way. That's what really happened in 2020 with the successes of the government. The government stopped. I mean, there was some examples of, there was like a manufacturing plant that had an air conditioner problem, and the military actually helped get that done quicker. It was a thing that was going to be delayed weeks, and they couldn't be delayed weeks, and so they did this convoy of these, I don't know, cooling units or something. There was some proactive stuff. For the most part, it was the government getting out of the way of private companies, which I think we need to do. And that's a problem on Republicans and Democrats. The bureaucracy is strong and the red tape is strong, and everyone wants all this control over every little thing and regulations. And that's what stifles creativity. It's what stifles innovation. It's what stifles businesses. And we've got to stop all that together.
Which former president would you draw inspiration from for your own presidency, and why?
One of the guys I'll take inspiration from is Calvin Coolidge. Now, people don't talk about him a lot. He's one of the few presidents that got almost everything right. He understood the proper role of the federal government under the Constitution. We need to restore the U.S. Constitution as the centerpiece of our national life, and that requires a president who understands the original understanding of the Constitution, who has a good sense of the Bill of Rights, and who knows how we've gone off track with this massive fourth branch of government, this administrative state which is imposing its will on us and is being weaponized against us. So Silent Cal knew the proper role of the federal government. The country was in great shape when he was president of the United States, and we can learn an awful lot from Calvin Coolidge.
I like Ron's answer. I like Calvin Coolidge. I like that he brought up a president that most people don't know much about because he was such a quiet president, in the sense that, like, he knew his proper role and what the role of the presidency was. It's interesting coming from Ron, though, because he's got an authoritarian streak in him. I don't like some of the things he's done in Florida as governor, which is basically, like, all the Disney stuff is essentially him punishing Disney for their opinions on something, because it went against him. I don't like that stuff. I'm fine with saying, look, we're going to end some of the, like, deals that we have with Disney, but I think it's fine. States and private companies, they can make deals like, for example, I think it's probably a good thing that, part of what Disney's edge is, just so you're aware, is that they got to control their district completely. They didn't have to sign up for permits. Again, getting rid of the red tape, essentially, so they could build things faster. They could do things. They were in control of that stuff. And he's trying to take that away because he doesn't like that they labeled his law a Don't Say Gay bill, which is not really what the law was about at all. And I don't blame him, but I think there were better ways to deal with it. And that's certainly not the government's job, is to punish private companies or private individuals for disagreeing with them. So he's got a bit of an authoritarian streak in him. I don't believe that he really would govern exactly like Calvin Coolidge, but I do like the answer. I do like Calvin Coolidge. I think it's a good answer. Overall, I think that was a better debate. I really do. I think that it was certainly more substantive. I think that it was, Megyn Kelly was a better moderator. I like that there were only 4 people on stage because, honestly, I'd really like to get rid of 2 of them. I like Christie. It's weird. Christie's great in the debates. I love how he says the things that other people aren't. I love that he's authentic. I think that people are attracted to that, but he's getting killed in the polls. He has no chance, I don't think. And so what I'd really like to see is Ramaswamy be gone. I don't think it's going to happen because he's a stalking horse for Trump. He's basically a Trump spokesperson that's there instead of Trump being there. And I don't like that. He has some decent points, but I don't think that I don't think he has he shouldn't be president. He shouldn't even be the nominee, but mostly because of his defense of Trump. I just can't get behind it. I really think this is about Haley and DeSantis at this point. I don't really think Christie doesn't really have a shot. He's going all in basically on New Hampshire, and he might get third place there. I mean, we're a little ways out from New Hampshire, so we'll see. But we are less than 6 weeks out from the Iowa caucuses. That's, I think, January 15th. Don't quote me on that. And I should know these dates at this point, but so January, we're going to see Iowa happen, New Hampshire and South Carolina, and then we'll move on to Super Tuesday where a bunch of people vote in March. I think there's maybe one more in between those two. But right now, it doesn't look like anyone other than Trump is going to win these states. So short of something crazy happening between now and then, I don't see how we're going to not end up with Trump as the nominee unless some sort of outside force, Trump has some sort of health issue, says something even crazier than he already has. The Republican base likes Trump. 81% approve of him. I don't understand it because I think that plainly he's not. You can dislike Biden and not have to like Trump. I don't think Biden's a good president. I think he's done a few things well, but generally he is too captured by his base, and he's letting people push him way further left than I think he really wants to be. Israel's a great example of that. The week of 10/7, he comes out, and I think he said some of the best stuff about Israel that any president has in a while. And then it's slowly kind of been pared back. It's like we're now seeing that he's, suggesting Israel should, maybe they don't need to eliminate Hamas. Maybe we should extend ceasefires. Maybe it's like he's doing this stuff without really. It's like he's trying to appease his base without changing his policy. He's been bad on a lot of stuff, and I don't want Joe Biden to be president again. Not just because, forget all the policy stuff. I think he's clearly he does not have the mental fortitude. I am nervous, like Nikki Haley, about what happens over the next 11 months. Before election day, and even after that. Because keep in mind, our elections are in November. He's still the president for 3 months, so we got a year and a month left. There's a lot going on in the world that I think is scary, and I think we need a commander-in-chief that can handle that stuff. I do not think it's Joe Biden. I think that we're seeing that there's a real problem here. It's like I'm seeing articles written about how he, his staff and his aides are trying to keep him on all this kind of stuff. Well, so who's running the place? There's some articles that are being written as in like this voice of the people around the president don't want him to do this, or they're trying to have him do this, or who's the president here? It worries me a lot. His age worries me a lot. I don't like most of his policies. I want a Republican to win if it's a good Republican, but that's not Trump for me. And you may disagree. I doubt it if you're listening or watching this, because I'm just going to guess, for as much as I crap on Trump, you're not going to be a fan of him too, maybe. But it's fine if you are. I just think that you've been lied to. I think you've been lied to by Trump. I think you've been lied to by conservative media. And I think that everyone but Christie on stage not being willing to go after him and say why they think he's unfit, because I think they all do think that. I think even Ramaswamy might think that. But they're just like, for DeSantis to not answer the question about do you think he's mentally fit for it, it's a yes/no question. And he could have even answered it by saying, I think he's more mentally fit than Biden is as far as just faculties, but I don't think his motivations and the things he's promising to do say that he's fit for office. Like, you could have answered it that way, but he just kept pretending that like, oh, it's just because he's almost 80. There are 80-year-olds that are, fully capable of being the president. I think you look at the Senate and like, no one thinks Chuck Schumer, who's like, I think 90, no one thinks he doesn't have the mental faculties to be there. He's sharp. He's not ever freezing up in press conferences like McConnell has, although I think McConnell's stuff was mostly from the fall, but still, it's scary. That person in the Senate is one thing, that person in the White House is another. And I think I think we can't flirt with that. So to me, it's not about an age. And for Ron to try to pretend that it's about because he's almost 80, that's the problem. The problem is that Donald Trump does not, we gave him a try. He did some things well. He did a lot of other things not well, I think. Even just looking at it objectively from here are the things that worked, here are the things that didn't work, here are the policies I liked, here are the policies I didn't like. He didn't do most of the things he promised he would do. I don't think he would have any better shot of doing that in a second term because who's he going to have in that White House? It's going to be a bunch of sycophants. It's going to be a bunch of yes men. It's going to be people that will do the things that he wants to do that are illegal. And he's said he wants to suspend the Constitution. He said he wants to go after his enemies. He wants to use the Justice Department as a weapon against his enemies. He wants to do the things that he's complaining about Biden doing to him. And I do think that Democrats have given him that weapon because they've gotten to say, he gets to say, look, the Russia stuff, for example, was a total hoax. And I know some people say, oh, it wasn't a hoax. Some people went to jail for it. Some people had guilty pleas. Donald Trump he's not a puppet of Putin. He was not installed by Putin. The election was not rigged. There were no votes changed. The wild conspiracies that came from the Democrats and the media in 2016 to 2018 or so were absolutely wrong, and it was wrong to weaponize the Justice Department essentially to do so. And Donald Trump is not wrong about that, but just because he's not wrong about that doesn't mean that everything since then has been a witch hunt. But I don't know, I'm going on a rant now for no reason, but the point is he's probably going to win the nomination. And I used to see some paths. I see less of a path. I still think Nikki Haley has the best path, but I don't think it's very likely. She's still dozens of points behind Trump in all of those states. Maybe something changes. Certainly hope something changes because I think that either Nikki or Ron would be good nominees and they would crush Biden in November. In fact, if it even looked a little bit like Nikki Haley or Nikki Haley or Ron DeSantis were going to maybe pull off an upset and win the nomination, I think you'd see Democrats scramble to get rid of Biden and force him to retire. And Biden even admitted the only reason he ran again is because Trump was running again. This is bad. We're going to have a 2020 rematch with two people that are not fit for the office. And we've got 330 million people in this country, and we're going to pick those same two guys. And I think it's insane. But Republicans have a chance to not do that. And I think they're going to squander it. I think they will elect Donald Trump again. And I think it's going to be bad. I do. I think that I do not have a lot of hope that things are going to go well. I think what we keep doing is when one party does something wrong, or maybe not illegal, but wrong or morally wrong, or abuses the power or takes something a step too far, the other party uses it as permission to do the same themselves and take it another step further. So you hear this all the time. It's like, well, if we don't do it, they will. And what you ended up with is like, this is what happened in the Senate with, they got rid of the filibuster, and McConnell says, you know what, that's going to come back to bite you. And sure enough, it is, because McConnell says, you know what, we're going to do that for judges now too. And it's just this tit for tat kind of thing of like, well, we better preemptively do it. And Republicans are doing it and Democrats are doing it. And it's because we have this fear of the other side. And we're like, well, we can do the illegal thing or the wrong thing to prevent the other person from doing it first. It's a bad mentality. And Trump absolutely amplifies that to the max, which is why I think he's dangerous. And, I think the problem is people are just remembering back to they had more money in their wallet. Their purchasing power was higher. We didn't have all these international conflicts going on when he was the president. And they're not wrong about those things. I just don't think that Donald Trump deserves the credit that he's getting for them either. He added a ton to the national debt. I think his tariff policies were absolutely detrimental to people. It's just that they don't realize that they were detrimental to them. And that's something that people got to talk about more, where his failures were, but it's like nothing works. So I'm not sure any of this matters. I'm not sure this debate matters. I'm not sure any of the primaries are going to matter. I wish we had a better system for this stuff. I think the primaries have proven that it's not a good way to select our leaders. It's just not. I don't think I have a lot of hope that that's going to change real soon, so we'll see. Iowa is in mid-January, and we will see what happens. I don't have a lot of hope that anything's going to happen. Sorry about the pessimism, but Donald Trump is so far ahead in the polls, and I realize polls are wrong. Ron DeSantis was not wrong to say that in 2022 it looked like there was going to be a red wave. Now, none of them had a red wave of 30 plus points, and most of that was because we lost the winnable seats that we let Donald Trump pick the candidates for, like freaking Dr. Oz in Pennsylvania, and basically everyone other than J.D. Vance lost. In fact, some of them were so kooky, Democrats were funding their primary campaigns because they knew this would be an easier person to beat in the general election than it would be to a normal Republican. All the normal Republicans are leaving Congress. They're leaving the Senate. I am not hopeful that the Republican Party is going to survive if they elect Donald Trump as their nominee for the next 4 years. I'm not sure if Donald Trump can win the presidency or not. But either way, I think we're in a bad situation. We either have Donald Trump as president, as an authoritarian, potentially weaponizing the Justice Department and potentially going after his enemies with criminal prosecutions, basically being vindictive solely, or we have Joe Biden, who seems to either not have the wherewithal to be president or is having other people do that job for him. And I think that's dangerous too. And I think the far left agenda that he's been like kind of caving to is dangerous too. So I don't have a lot of hope for the next 4 years if either one of them are the nominees. At this point, I'm just hoping that something crazy happens and makes us all wake up to realize that we shouldn't nominate either one of these guys to be the president. But I'm not going to hold my breath. Anyway, that's it for me. Thanks for sticking around. I will catch you next week and talk to you then.